Your first video in Unit 2 on evolution and ecology. In this video, we'll begin by discussing ecosystem ecology. Um, Ecosystem ecology is pretty much going to look at ecosystems and their interactions between the living and non-living world. We can start by defining ecosystems as a location on Earth that has similar characteristics when we're looking at your biotic and abiotic components. This diagram here is showing you some of the major biotic and abiotic components of an ecosystem. So if you look at the biotic components here, or the living things here, what would they be? So we see a rabbit, a fox, a tree. You see some decomposers. Those will all be your major biotic things. And then you have your abiotic or non-living features of this ecosystem. And you see the precipitation, water, nutrients, carbon dioxide, and so on. Before we begin discussing ecology, let's talk about a few ecology definitions. So a species is going to be a group of similar organisms whose members can freely interbreed and produce fertile offspring. So for instance, we as humans would be considered to be of the same species. Then we have populations, which are a group of organisms of the same species that are in the same area at the same time. So if we looked at all the humans on our planet, we're of the same species, and we're currently all on our planet at the same time, so we would be a population of humans. Communities are going to be all populations of different species that live and interact in the same area at the same time. So for this one, you can think about the community that you live in. You have humans there, you have your pets, you may have wild animals that live in your community. You're all there and you're interacting together at the same time. And then ecosystems are going to be a community and its abiotic environment. So not only are we looking at the non-living things here, not only are we looking at the living things, we're looking at the abiotic things, such as your temperature, climate, amount of precipitation, all those things. And finally, we have a landscape, which is a group of several interacting ecosystems, also known as a biome. Ecosystem boundaries are not necessarily clearly defined. Some ecosystems, such as caves and lakes, can have a very distinctive boundary because you can tell exactly where that cave or where that lake ends. But we also have some ecosystems where it's going to be very difficult to determine where that one ecosystem stops and the other ecosystem begins. And these boundaries are usually determined by the abiotic and biotic components that are in that region. Even though it can be helpful to distinguish between two different ecosystems, we know that in nature, ecosystems interact with each other, and it's very hard to say this is one ecosystem and that's another ecosystem. But the boundary or the area between ecosystems is called an ecotone. This is kind of a transitional area where you have a mixture of species from two adjacent ecosystems. So, for instance, you may have a marsh wetland or marsh or wetland in between an area of dry land and the open water. That would be considered an ecotone. We do have very large ecosystems and very small ecosystems. As you can see in this diagram here, if you look at the figure on your left, you're seeing the greater Yellowstone ecosystem, and which is including all of the land within the Yellowstone National Park, as well as many adjacent properties. And that would be considered a very large ecosystem. But then on the opposite end of the spectrum, if you look at the diagram on your right, some ecosystems can be very small, such as a rain-filled tree hole that houses a variety of microbes and aquatic insects. So what keeps us and other organisms alive? There are going to be two concepts here. The first one, we have four major components to our life support system, which are going to be the air we're breathing, the water, the rock, soil, and sediments, as well as the biosphere. And then the second concept is that energy from the sun is flowing through the biosphere. We also have nutrients cycling through the biosphere, as well as gravity, which is helping to hold our atmosphere in place. And again, same thing I just said. Three factors helping sustain life on Earth. We have this one-way flow of high-quality energy, nutrients such as carbon, phosphorus, nitrogen, water. These are all cycling through parts of the biosphere, and then gravity is helping to hold Earth's atmosphere in place because without our atmosphere, we would not have life on our planet because we know that it's keeping our planet warm, helping to block out some of the sun's harmful solar rays with this ozone layer, and then the gases in our atmosphere help to trap some of that heat from the sun. When we're studying ecology, we're looking at how organisms interact with each other and how they interact with their non-living environment. We've already defined organisms, populations, and communities. Now I want to give you the definition for biosphere. So when we talk about the biosphere, we're talking about the region of our planet where life resides. And it's pretty much a combination of all of the different ecosystems on Earth. We're looking at that part of the atmosphere where animals and organisms are, the part of the geosphere where organisms are, the part of the hydrosphere where organisms are. And here's a chart showing you the levels of organization in nature. Ecologists are mainly going to focus on your top five, which are your biosphere, ecosystems, communities, and populations and organisms or species. Here's just a few pictures showing you the diversity of life on our planet. Biodiversity, or the diversity of life, is going to be one of our greatest natural resources, which is being depleted by human activity. So if we're reducing the biodiversity on our planet, we're also reducing one of our greatest natural resources that we depend on for so many things. Energy is going to flow through different ecosystems. Um, to understand how ecosystems function and how best to protect and manage them, ecosystem ecologists also study the processes that move energy and matter within an ecosystem. So we know we get most all of our energy from the sun. When that energy from the sun reaches our planet, producers, also known as autotrophs, use that solar energy and convert it using photosynthesis, which they're going to get their glucose from, and that's their energy source. So if we look at this top diagram here, you see the energy coming in from the sun. Those plants are also going to use carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and water to carry out this process of photosynthesis, where they're going to produce the glucose that they need, and then they're going to produce oxygen and release the oxygen into the atmosphere. And then we have the process of cellular respiration, where we have all other organisms, including some producers, where they take in oxygen and glucose, the glucose they're getting from eating the producer, and they're releasing carbon dioxide and the water and energy into their surroundings. And here's just once more a definition for cellular respiration, where you're gaining energy by eating those producers. And then if we were to go back here, you'll see that once we've eaten that producer, we've used oxygen, we're releasing energy into our surroundings with the activities that we do, and we're also releasing carbon dioxide and water. Um, the top diagram you saw was aerobic respiration, which is pretty much the exact opposite of photosynthesis. And this is done in environments where you have oxygen. But some organisms, such as bacteria, live in the mud underlying a swamp where oxygen is not going to be available. And they're going to conduct anaerobic respiration, a process by which cells convert glucose into energy in the absence of oxygen.